What's up, guys? In today's LEGO video, I'm going to be showing you how to motorize your LEGO Orient Express. I'm going to be showing you two methods to do so, and at the end, I'm also going to talk and discuss a couple other options you have to motorize this if you didn't like the first two options or if you're looking to do something different. The first option is the easier option, the more cost-effective option, the simpler option. Honestly, it's an option that's for LEGO train builders that are new to the train game, new to LEGO, or they don't have as many parts or they're not as equipped with LEGO yet. It's a simpler, quicker solution. You could try it out, modify it a bit more to make it look a little prettier than mine does. And the second solution is what you may have seen on other channels. It is putting the L motor in the Locomotive. It definitely looks great. It's pretty cool, but it is a little pricier. So I wanted to have at least one other method that I think works quite well. And it's simple. Simpler, I should say. Because this other method, they did a pretty great job of making sure it works well. But right now I have my method installed, as you can see. It drives quite well. I think that's beautiful. Well, without any further ado, I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to show you the first method and the second method. I'll leave timestamps to everything. At the end, I'll discuss a couple other options you have, things that I think won't work well, and pros and cons for both of these methods. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. If you really enjoy this at the end of the day, please leave me a like. And if you want to see more LEGO train content and other random LEGO content, hit that subscribe button. Well, let's get into it. The first method I used to motorize this was actually what most LEGO train builders wouldn't like to do. It is motorizing the tender. And the reason I did this is because there are other motorized versions with the L motor in the Locomotive, which is pretty cool, and that's typically what I would have done. But I wanted to try this because it's such a large tender, and for this one it would fit on it. Now mine does not look as pretty. It does work, and at the end I'll show you both of them side by side, and you could decide which one is faster or better for yourself. But the battery box fits perfectly in there. I think LEGO knew what they did when they were designing this to be as large as it was, being that it perfectly fits the battery box. I think they were well aware that people would motorize it. Now obviously this doesn't look pretty, but it only uses these parts to motorize the tender, and it can pull the entire train. Here's the back. The reason I don't have mine looking really nice is because I wanted a very simplistic method in which you could use the parts that are on this set and you don't have to buy a lot of extra parts, and hopefully the parts being used are parts that you could find with your LEGO parts. You could do a whole lot here that I did not do. You could make it very more decorative. It could be cleaner and look better. But essentially, we have our battery box in here. It fits quite well. Now both the methods are going to have the battery box in this location. This one I decided I ran the wire down and under so it does not come outside of the tender, which I think is really nice, and it's something that you could barely tell it's there, and most people wouldn't even notice that the tender has the motor on it unless you're really further examining this. Here's what the inside looks like, and I'm going to show you a step-by-step on how I built this in just a moment. That way you can do it yourself. Underneath the tender looks like this. I took off 2 of the 4x6 plates, and that way you can install the motor with this pin that comes up. That way it can fit in there, and then the battery box can go on top of it, as well as room for the wire to come up. So the first thing I did is I took a 2x2 plate. I put it there on the back. So the 2x2 plate and 2 1x2 plates, these ones, are the only parts I have added to this, including the train motor and the battery pack. You can also buy a train remote, but you can also use the LEGO Powered Up app. The design I went with here is very simple and basic. It is to minimize the amount of parts you need for this build. This coupler plate, the 2x2 plate here with the modified piece, I stuck that out 1 extra stud length, and that is because we're raising the entire tender 1 stud length higher, and it had a very slight rubbing effect with the Locomotive. That's why I raised it out. Now, these are the parts I used from the set, but you can also incorporate all your own parts and even some of the other parts from the set to make this look nicer. For example, here where I have the 4 blue parts, you could replace that with a brick. You could do really anything here. You could use black parts, dark gray, or dark blue. That way it matches with the scheme of the Orient Express. However, I'm showing you what you can do with the simplest amount of parts to create this. And honestly, you could probably do this even a little better or pull some parts somewhere off of the set to make this happen and still have everything in working order. But if you have a few parts, then really you just need 3 plate pieces, your motor, and your battery box. Then I have these 2 2x4 plates here on the bottom. This allows an area for the wire to go through, and then the large open area for the pin to go through. You could also add additional plates here, 1x4 black plates. That way you cover in that gap. You can do a lot more. Really anything here, you can make it much more decorative than mine is. Now, when you connect this, the back piece here should be flush to that coupler right here. That's what the offset jumpers help to do. And that way when you connect it, you'll see this on the front and that coupler will be under here. You could always add a 2x4 plate underneath where this coupler piece is connecting to prevent it from twisting from side to side. I didn't add that piece, but again, these are little things you could do to make this look much cleaner. And then you could add any additional pieces here to prevent this twist, or really, again, to add decorativeness to it. The twisting doesn't cause any problems, or it hasn't yet for me. And then here we have our battery box. The battery box has both A and B on it. Make sure you know which terminal you're plugged into. The remote corresponds. So here we have A, and then over here we have B. If you don't know which one you plugged it into, then simply just press a button on the remote and see which one gets it to move, and then you'll know how it works. Battery box fits in. You could tuck the wire right in here, and then we're going to put the other piece of this tender on top. Now, if you click this allows you to have different colors here for your remote and battery box. This is pretty much for if you have multiple trains or multiple setups with different batteries and different remotes. That way you could connect multiple different things at once and have different remotes running at the same time. It's kind of like frequencies on a radio. Then in here, if you wanted to, you could add a little stud on this trapdoor that would prevent you from pulling this trapdoor up, and you could simply press in when you're turning on or off the battery. But I didn't add that. Again, I tried to be very minimalistic with this just for you guys. And then let's hook this up and then see how it works. If you do this properly, that coupler should be the same height as the coupler on the Locomotive. The wheels, you do not need a rubber band for this model because the rubber bands are on the Lego train motor that is on our tender. And honestly, I think it works great. Towards the end of the video, you will be able to see for yourself which one you think is better, because after this, I'm going to show you the L motor. See, it goes quite fast. Check it out. As you can see, it works quite well, but with any Lego train set, especially a set like this that is quite heavy, the passenger wagons have a lot of parts on them, so it's a lot for this train motor to pull. If that's the case, you really need a larger layout, fewer curves. You don't want just a circle, you want to have more straights. That way the train has a straight area to really gain speed. As you can see here, I'm going to show you that it can pull one wagon, and then I'll show you that it can pull two wagons. It does get slower as you add the wagons or the amount of train cars you would have, because you're increasing the weight that this locomotive is now pulling. Or excuse me, the tender, this motor I should say. I think it works quite well, but simply adding more straights and decreasing the amount of curves you have will drastically help. If this is something where you only have room for one small circle of track, I currently do not know a method for you that would work really well or that would work quick enough. The next thing you could try would be the train motor and the L motor, but maybe I'll have to do another video on that and see if that really helps increase the speed. It'd be off the same battery pack, and therefore it would deplete the batteries, but it should have double the power, and then just a shorter lifespan on the batteries. But here it works quite well. It took a little bit of time to pull it out of the switched area, and that is because of all the curves there. It did pull it out. Like I said, it just took a little bit of time, but then once it's out here, it works all right. I did add a few other straights here that you'll see in a moment, and once I did that, it really had a bit more speed. And then later on in the video, I realized, I'm like, hey, this doesn't seem like it's moving much at all. I switched out the batteries in the tender within the battery box, and it was moving much faster, and you'll see that in a moment. And that's because this motor and battery I pulled off of one of the new Lego train sets that were released in 2022, I believe, the Lego City train sets, and it was a motor that I had used multiple times. Here is the Lego train with more track, more straight pieces. As you can see, it moves a little bit faster, and in a moment you're going to see how fast it moves when I replace the batteries. Again, these batteries were getting older, and it's just not something I thought of till later on. Here we are, brand new batteries. Goes fast. You can see it slows down on curves. These are very long passenger wagons, and it's a very heavy Lego train, but it's very doable. If you even take these curves and you add straights in between them, then your train might move much better than it does here. but a very long, heavy train like this is going to be a little slower than the light Lego City trains. Now I'm going to show you a method by Rebrickable. I actually did not motorize this locomotive myself with any of my own methods. I did their method to see how it would work, to kind of explain it to you guys, to tell you the pros and cons and everything. But overall, most train guys, most of the guys, or people I should say, Lego builders in the train community, we want to strive to motorize our locomotives. With most Lego motors, aside from the train motor I showed you earlier, this motor, when you're pressing a button on the remote, it's bringing the motor up to its full speed instantly. It's not varying it up one by one, where this remote, when I hit the button, each time I hit the button for the other motor, that when I motorized the tender, it would bring it up one more variation or one more increment in speed, and therefore the train would slowly progress to a faster speed, and you have a slower startup. It's more realistic. This one actually, it's causing the wheels to have a lot of slippage. They're just rapidly spinning and they don't have enough friction or enough traction in the beginning to get the train going. But then once it gets up to speed, it does a pretty good job of maintaining that speed. If you want to use this motor at a variable speed where you can progressively increase the power to it, that henceforth increasing the speed and making it act like the train motor does, you can download the Powered Up app on your mobile device and you can create your own layout for the remote and actually increase the speed to the motor. That, so far, to my knowledge, has only been able to be done on the Powered Up app. I have another video on that. I'll make sure to link it in my description, and it is what I've done for the Hogwarts Express that I motorized. Overall, the L motor works well. You will need a few more parts. You will need the L motor, the battery pack. The L motor is more expensive than the train motor, but then again, you could still use your mobile device as a remote, and therefore you still don't need to buy a remote. I will briefly go through the instructions that Rebrickable has. Again, these are not mine. I will leave links in my description for everything I used, but I want to at least discuss them to help those of you out there who are trying to do this that may have questions about the instruction template that they put together. I think it's amazing that how they did it. It's wonderful how it's a clean walkthrough. It's much better than my videos where I show, here are the pieces you need, and I go step by step. Here I'm just going to scroll through and show you the steps that they have for their train, but essentially a lot of these steps are very similar, but there are parts where at first I was like, where are these parts coming from? And they take apart quite a bit of the locomotive. For example, this hinge piece here and that modified plate, they come from up towards the front of the locomotive. You're going to want to take the locomotive apart in sections and patiently go through this to rebuild it and make it work. You need to finagle the wire just a little bit to make sure it fits, and you need to pay attention to the parts that you leave out within the compartment or where the minifigure would go. That way the wire could come through and enter into the tender, into the battery box. The battery box is very simple. You enter, you put it right in the tender, similar to what I did earlier on in this video. And you know, the tender that they built is great because it is designed where it can hold a full battery pack. Some of these parts they say are not necessarily needed. You could definitely mess around with this method a bit if you want, or based on the parts you have. There are some in here that if you really walk through it, you might discover that you don't need them. Obviously, you'll need all the gear pieces. You'll need some of the other Technic parts, such as the axles, to make this happen. I thought this was very creative, and now I'm going to tell you why I didn't do any other methods and why I don't think many other methods would work. If you've seen any of my LEGO Hogwarts Express videos, I used a smaller LEGO motor to motorize them. It is a cheaper motor than this large motor. However, it is not capable of pulling the amount of weight that this train has. Although it's cheaper, it just would not work to pull this entire train. I do not think it was... Knowing how much difficulty it had pulling my Hogwarts Express with 5 passenger wagons that weighs less than this entire train, I know for a fact it would not work well with this locomotive and with this entire train. Therefore, I didn't see it worth it to create a different method. Aside from that, I love the motorized tender. It is not something I will often say in a train video, and maybe I'll come up with different methods, but that's why I'm not going to show you other methods. I don't think it's worth wasting anybody's time, but by all means, LEGO is a fun toy, and if you have different motors, play around with it. Don't be afraid to modify your locomotive to add all different things. These parts are where you want to make sure you leave out this piece here and the other piece previously on the other page. That way the wire can feed through your locomotive, through the cabin, and into the tender. I didn't leave out one of those parts at first, and it was definitely a tight fit. It still worked, but if you leave that out, you'll be better off. Take out the door piece here, put in the battery box, feed the wire through. That's as simple as that. Here is the list of parts you'll need. You actually will not need the 1x2 bricks shown there because they are to modify the passenger wagons. I will also leave a link in the description to the rubber band you'll need to at least make sure your train locomotive has friction. On the left there was the motorized tender, and on the right was with the L motor. They both work quite well, but it seems to me that the tender pulls a little faster, and for me, I'm going to keep the tender motorized for now. Well, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave me a like, please subscribe to see more train content, and let me know if you have any questions or comments. Thank you for checking this out.
Lego, my Jameso.